Great. I think we're up and running, Stephanie.
Think we're up and running?
I think so.
Okay, great. It's for everybody who's trickling in, it's just the two of us today on this panel. Usually we have a third person who knows how to deal with all the buttons and stuff with Zoom. So we're going to do our best to, get through this. And thank you for your patience, of course, as we figure it out. Yeah, okay. So I'll wait a couple minutes here, I guess, for people to trickle in. How's the weather where you're at, Trish? Is it pretty cloudy?
It is cloudy, but it has stopped raining. So that's nice. I mean, the rain is always good.
Rain is always good. I know. I can't wait until I'm somebody who gets so excited when fall's around the corner and we're getting rain and, cozy weather and pumpkin spice lattes.
Yeah. That reminds me, you should see the size of my kids' pumpkins. They went to the pumpkin patch on Friday
That's amazing.
and came back with really big pumpkins.
Of course. Of course.
They wanted the biggest,
Oh, I love it.
packed, covered in mud.
You wouldn't be doing it properly if you weren't covered in mud.
Yeah.
All right. Well, it's 1:03, so maybe I will jump into it as people are coming in. I have a few housekeeping items to go through. So the first thing I'll mention, oh, where are my notes here? It's just a mess today. Hi. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. We're so excited to have you here and so excited to talk about this position because it's a really important one in the office and it's doing a lot of incredible work. So thank you for taking the time to be with us today. Like I said, as we're waiting for folks to trickle in, I just have a few housekeeping items. You should see a slide on your screen right now. I'll just review that. So audio and chat functions have not been enabled for this webinar. So if you do have any questions that pop up for you while we're in the session, you should see a Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you can just submit questions that way. If we do have time at the end of the session, we'll go into that and look at those questions and answer a few of those. If we don't have time at the end of this session, please feel free to send your questions in via email and we can answer them that way as well. So please don't hesitate to reach out if you do have questions that are unanswered through this session. What else do I need to mention? Confidentiality is something that we take very seriously. So you will remain anonymous to your fellow webinar participants. Like I mentioned, there's a Q&A function for any questions that you have. If you do use that, there's a way to submit questions anonymously. So I'd suggest doing that if you do submit any questions. It's just an added layer there. We won't be sharing your name when we do answer those questions, but like I said, it's just an added layer of that confidentiality to submit your questions anonymously. And the last thing that I'll mention, which is probably one of the most important ones, is that this session is being recorded and it will be posted to the careers page in the next couple of days. This posting closes in a couple of days, actually. So hopefully we're able to get it up before then. And anybody who wasn't able to join us today can review the session on the website. So with that, that's all of my housekeeping introduction stuff. So with that, I think I will just dive right in. My name is Stephanie. It says I'm BCOHRC engagement right now on Zoom, but my name is Stephanie and I work in human resources and I support BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner and the Office of the Representative for Children and Youth. So two incredibly meaningful offices, independent offices of the legislature here in BC. Joining me on the call today is Trish Garner, who is the Executive Director of Research and Policy here at BC OHRC. And they'll be talking more about the position, the office, the team, the stuff you're really here to hear about in a second here. Let me see here. And then once Trish goes over all of that information, we'll come back to me and I'll talk about what we offer as an employer, steps and tips for the hiring process, answer some of those questions that you've sent in. And like I said, at the end, if we have time, we'll open it up for more questions. Speaking of questions, we did have a few questions come in with your registration. We asked if you had any questions for us, and some of you submitted some. So thank you so much for sending those in. Up on this slide here, I just have a few of those questions that we'll be answering throughout the webinar that you submitted in advance. And with that, I think I'm going to stop talking now, and I'm going to pass it over to Trish.
Great, thanks so much, Stephanie. And welcome everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon. As Stephanie said, my name's Trish, and I'm the ED of Research and Policy here at the office. I've been here for almost 2 years now, which is pretty much when we were established this time around. So almost the whole time, one of the founding group. I'm here in what's now known as Burnaby North, Burnaby Heights, on the traditional ancestral unceded territories of the Halkominam and Squamish speaking peoples. I'm very grateful for their stewardship over many, many generations. And I use the pronoun they, them, theirs. And I'm just going to start with just a brief overview of the office, who we are as BC's Office of the Human Rights Commissioner, to give you a sense of what we are and what we're not, as many of you are probably coming from different contexts, whether that's a community organization or academia or wherever it might be, unless you have direct experience in this kind of office. You won't really know what it's like, so I'll just give you a sense of that. So like I said, we got starting again after a 17-year gap without a commission here in BC. The previous Human Rights Commission was decommissioned in 2002. So a huge gap without us, without this office. We were started up back in September a couple of years ago when Kasari Govender was appointed as the Human Rights Commissioner. And she is a human rights lawyer, previously the executive director of West Coast Leaf, and she brings that experience of working on feminist rights and gender-based violence to the work. We are, as an office, we're sort of part of 3 families of offices, and I just want to give you a sense of who they are so you know who we work closely with and who we borrow from in many cases, so you can see kind of how we set up. So the first one is that we're part of a tripartite human rights system. So there's also the tribunal and the clinic. And the tribunal is the body that hears individual complaints of discrimination under the Human Rights Code, if people bring those forward. And the clinic, or clinics, there are a few around the province, helps people bring those complaints to the tribunal. So the difference with us is that we have a really broad statutory mandate under the Human Rights Code to address systemic discrimination and to really promote the prevention rather than just responding to discrimination. We can hopefully try and make change to prevent. And we also get to draw on international human rights frameworks. So we can look really broadly at discrimination rooted within our attitudes and behaviors and our systems and laws and policies. And we have really powerful mandated tools to do that work through education, research, interventions, inquiries, and monitoring. So we play a very different role to the tribunal and the clinic, and it was a huge loss without a commission in place to do that systemic preventative upstream work, if you want to call it that. So our office is all about monitoring and acting as a watchdog, really, for human rights in the province. And so we work very closely with the tribunal and with the clinics. So that's one family that we're a part of. The second one I'll raise your attention to is that we're one of a number of independent offices or officers of the legislature. Stephanie mentioned the representative of the children and youth, and we work very closely with her and her office. The ombudsperson you might have heard of. There are a few. There's a whole list of them, and we're part of that family, and we draw a lot from, given that we're just starting out, we draw a lot from their expertise and borrow policies, internal policies, and that kind of thing. But we are the first fully independent human rights commissioner in BC. So what that means for us in our independence is we don't report to a particular minister or ministry. That's quite different from other commissions across the country. And we can investigate discrimination and injustice wherever it might appear, including within government. That's part of our watchdog role. But we are public service agency employees, and we are bound by core government policy. So we may feel more like a government institution than people might be familiar with. And then the third I'll just briefly mention is CASHRA, which stands for the Canadian Association of Statutory Human Rights Agencies. And so this is a larger family across the whole of Canada. Most provinces and territories have a human rights commission. Sometimes it's the same as their tribunal. They're in the same institution. And we work collectively with those human rights commissions across the country, particularly from our perspective with the RMP folks at those commissions, and learn from them and hear from them about their experience. So those are the three families that we're a part of. And then internally, in terms of structure, we have the commissioner, Kasari Governor, then we have a deputy commissioner, and then we have four main departments. So research and policy is one of them, alongside communications, education and engagement, and legal. Along with E&E, the education and engagement department, we are one of the bigger departments. So we have myself, we're hiring for this role, which is the manager of research. We have a manager of policy, and then those two teams within the department. And we will be reaching 4 in the research team and 3 in the policy team once we finish this wave of hiring. And overall, the office is going to be about 30 to 35 people. And we strive to work across departments as a multidisciplinary team. So in any project, we'll have representation from each of those departments. So we'll be called in to another department's project, and we'll be a research rep on their project team, and they vice versa for us. We also have a manager of operations to support us internally, and we share what's called corporate shared services, which is Stephanie and her team from HR. So they work with RCY and with us. Same for the IT and the finance folks as well. So we share those folks. I'm very glad to, because they bring a lot of expertise that we're just learning as we go. You'll probably have seen from our website, so switching gears a little bit into content, you probably know from our website that we have set some strategic priorities for the work. So our research work is structured within these 5 priorities. So it's a foundational one, which will stay the course, is discrimination under the BC Human Rights Code. And then we also have decolonization, poverty, hate and the rise of white supremacy, and human rights for those detained by the state, in particular, mental health detention and criminal justice detention. And those may change. The other important thing to note about this office is that the commissioner has a 5-year term. She's 2 years in, so 3 more years. She may get a second term, but we don't know, and we won't know until that point in time. And so if the commissioner changes, a lot will change internally. These strategic priorities may change, processes may change, priorities, relationships, that's something that I'm still yet to learn. We also have a very robust set of guiding principles that you've probably also seen on the website, really trying to bring our values to life through the work that we do. I won't go through them all, but we do really try and hold a human rights and a decolonizing approach to address those root causes of injustice. And part of this is that we believe process is as important as product. So we really try and focus on building relationship with each other. That's internally, that's externally with communities, and with the land we live on, always working from that recognition. So that's a little bit of intro to our office, to give you, like I said, a sense of what we are and what we're not. Just moving into now the research and policy department and what we do and our function within the office. So research and policy obviously plays a crucial role in fulfilling the goals and objectives of the office, advancing work in those strategic priorities, as well as monitoring and responding to critical and emerging issues. And that's been a huge part of the work in the last 2 years. We came into this work thinking that we would spend about 70% of our time on planned work and 30% on emerging issues. That has not been the case. I mean, COVID wasn't anticipated, or I guess it was anticipated by some, but not us in our work planning. So we've actually spent a lot more on emerging issues, probably actually flipped there. So probably more like 70% on emerging issues and 30 on planned. And we're keeping an eye on that over the next little while. So some of the things that we're up to, we're developing and updating internal policies and guidelines that apply to our work. It's one of the exciting things about coming in here and potentially challenging is that there really isn't anything in place. So it can feel a little ad hoc and unstable at times until we develop all of these structures and processes, the scaffolding that you need to do your work. But the exciting thing is you get to be a part of that. We are launching comprehensive research and policy projects on some of those issues aligned with our strategic priorities, and working with the Education and Engagement Department to engage with community on those projects. And I'll mention a few specifics in a little bit. And when those emerging issues come up, the R&P department is the place where the information gathering happens, whether that's through desk research or community outreach to bring in information and analysis, which may lead to recommendations for action. So we've been doing a lot on COVID, obviously, and other issues that have come up over the year or two. The research team obviously spends a lot of time supporting the policy team. We work closely together. So the policy team monitors government activities and development of legislation, like for instance, the Declaration Act, the Accessibility Act, those kind of things. And we may be called in to support with research support for their work. We also support the legal department, often in their human rights investigations and inquiries. For instance, you've probably seen the legal team launched our first ever inquiry on hate in the pandemic. And obviously there's a lot of research support needed for that. So that's a big piece of the work right now. I'll just actually mention one of the questions I think really spoke to this piece of what I was going to say. So one of the questions was directly, how much does this role contribute to or work directly on BC OHRC advocacy initiatives? And I would say very much. Sometimes it will be a direct research project that leads to advocacy recommendations, and then the research team gets to see those through. So for instance, we wrote the Grandmother's Perspective report last year and made some recommendations about anti-discrimination data legislation. That led to the government picking that up, and now they're working directly with us on that legislation. And so myself as the lead researcher there gets to work with the government directly on those recommendations. So sometimes it would be direct like that. Other times it will be indirect and more of a support role for, say, policy recommendations or legal recommendations. I guess the last thing to say about what we are involved in, just in general, is monitoring and evaluation across the organization. So if people have expertise around evaluating for impact and in relation to our strategic priorities, that's a key asset too. So that's kind of a general sense. In terms of more specifics on what we're working on right now in the research team, the big project is called the Baseline Project right now. And it's a very ambitious project to map human rights across BC. What are the issues for communities? What are the priorities? What are the solutions already tried or already advocated for? What are the barriers to those? Really trying to get a sense of those human rights issues and what's worked and what hasn't. We've been working on the development of this for really a year and a half, but we're about to start some of the implementation steps. We haven't had any capacity until now to really get into it, but we're about to dive into it. And at the heart of it, it's really a community engagement project. So a lot of working with communities of different kinds. So that's the big research project over the next year. And it's to set a baseline, if you're familiar with that term, from monitoring and evaluation, to set a baseline from which we can then measure progress, or have things move forward, backwards, sideways on these issues, and to measure our impact within that. On the policy side, their big project that they're working on, just about to launch, is employment equity. So building some employment equity toolkits for duty bearers. And so there's some research elements there that we're supporting with. So those are the two big pieces that our department's working on, but there's always a lot more going on. And then, of course, like I said, there's always just building the team, the structures. So a lot of what we've been doing over the last 2 years is hiring, onboarding, and really trying to support staff, setting people up for success coming in. So a lot of growth and development as we build up the team. I think I'll leave it there for now, Stephanie, and we can jump into the questions.
Okay, that sounds great. Except I have stuff to talk about too.
Right. There is the HR, important information, and then we'll get to questions.
Very, very important information. I'll try not to bore you all too much. Yeah, so I'll talk about some of the HR pieces and the hiring process. I also want to just take a moment. I thank you for your beautiful acknowledgement, Trish, of where you're calling in from. I don't know where everybody's joining us from today. It's really exciting for us to see such diverse interest in the office and in this role from all over BC and all over beyond BC. It's really exciting for us to see. So like I said, I don't know where everybody's joining us from today. I want to recognize that I am joining you virtually from the traditional and unceded lands of the Semiahmoo, Katzie, Coquitlam, Kwantlen, Kikite, and Tsawwassen First Nations, also known as Surrey, BC. And as part of that too, I want to recognize the ancestral and continuing connection to this land of the Métis people. Okay. I am very grateful to live, play, and now to work virtually here as well. I can't emphasize how grateful and I am for that. Okay, so let's talk about the HR stuff, the exciting stuff. What do we offer as an employer? Whenever I get this question, I think about what brought me to this work, and the answer to that is that it's meaningful work. The opportunity to support an independent office of the legislature that is there to contribute to systemic change in the province is an incredible opportunity and just incredibly meaningful, and something that I find personally really rewarding. And as I think it's related, as a result of that, you get to work with incredible people too, externally and internally. Our team here is something that I'm really grateful for. It's full of incredible people who are unique and dedicated and passionate, and we're always learning from each other, which is another thing that you would find here is you're constantly learning from people and learning from people's expertise and the knowledge and the experience that they bring to their work and to their lives. Let's see, the other piece, Trish mentioned this earlier, is that the office is in startup. So while that can be really exciting, it brings its challenges. It's something we want to be honest about, but it is exciting, to be able to be involved in an office very early days, building those foundations out. Just something unique that if that's something that excites you, then, maybe this is a place for you. The other things that we offer are, okay, so for this position in particular, I'll mention that it is a permanent full-time role. It's excluded from a union, so it's not a unionized position. Received a question about the salary. Is the salary firm? Yes. As listed in the posting, the salary is firm, and that's in accordance with BCOHRC's salary administration policy. With this position, there are flexible benefits. That includes extended medical and dental. Vacation leave starts at 140 hours or 20 days per year. That's prorated based on when you start. So if you're starting a bit later in the year, like we're getting into the fall now, then your vacation entitlement will be prorated based on that. And vacation time grows over time. So the longer you are employed with the office, the more vacation entitlement you are entitled to. And then there's other sick leave, including, or not other sick leave, other special leave, including sick leave, special leave for life events, long-term disability, those leaves that you don't want to use, but are there for you if you need them through your employment here. The other thing that I'll mention too is that this position contributes to the BC Public Service Pension Plan. So that's another benefit there. And some pensions do transfer into that plan as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Hiring process. So let's talk about the hiring process. Let's talk about some tips for the hiring process. Right now, we're accepting applications. The posting is open. Once the posting closes, we'll start looking at applications, reviewing them, and creating the shortlist for moving forward to the next stages of the process, which are things like written assignments and interviews. What I'll mention is that job profile that you see in the job posting is a really great resource because our hiring process really draws from that job profile. So as an example, like I said, we're collecting applications right now. When we move into screening and reviewing applications, we're looking at applications in reference to the job profile and the requirements that are listed in the job profile. So in the job profile, you'll see a heading that says requirements, and then underneath it's split out into different subcategories. So education and experience, preference statements, knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies are what you'll see under that heading. And so when we receive applications, we're reviewing those applications against those job requirements, in particular, the education and experience requirements, and perhaps the preference statements. We might look at those too at this stage. And so if you take anything from this webinar, besides all of the things that Trish has said, which were great, I hope you take this part away too, which is that we cannot make assumptions about people's experience. So we're relying on you to demonstrate for us how you meet those education and experience requirements, because we're not able to bring anybody forward who doesn't meet all of those education and experience requirements in particular, because those are the minimum requirements for the position. So I want to be really clear about that. Like I said, we can't make assumptions and we have to be able to defend our decisions. So we're really looking for people to clearly demonstrate how, when, and where you meet those qualifications with enough information for us to know that you've gained the experience that we're looking for. And that's probably the biggest tip that I have for, when people ask, do you have any tips for me putting together my application? That's the biggest one, is really tailor it to the position and tailor it to those requirements that you see in that job profile, because that's what we're using to decide who moves forward. Okay, and like I said, sorry. Once we finish screening, we'll move to next stages, which will include a written assignment and an interview. Going back to that job profile, like I said, a really great resource throughout this hiring process, because when we move forward to things like assessments and interviews, we're looking at those other requirements that are in the job profile. So those knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies. So keep that job profile close and make sure that you have it throughout the process. The other thing I'll confirm is that we are offering virtual instead of in-person interviews at this time. You'll be hearing a lot from us, so please make sure that you regularly check your email. That's the primary way that we'll get in touch with you. And if your email or contact information changes, let us know so that we can update it and make sure that we can still get in touch with you. We're trying to build as much time and flexibility into this process as we're able to, while respecting that we want to welcome new people in quickly because we're excited about the work and we want to get started on the work. So if at any time you experience any barriers in this process, or if you have any accessibility options that might be helpful for you, we want you to let us know. And I want to be clear about this, that asking the question or bringing this forward is not going to negatively impact your application at all. If this is something that applies to you, please let us know. We want to make sure that we're taking reasonable steps to, make this process accessible and barrier-free as much as possible. So please bring those forward if you do have those concerns throughout the process. I did get a question asking if the application process is confidential. Short answer to that is yes. The hiring panel, people on the hiring panel are the only people who are reviewing your application. And I will say too that each competition that we have in the office is treated as a separate process. So if you've applied to multiple positions in the office, that's not something that we're sharing with hiring panels. That's something that's, kept in each separate process. So you don't have to worry about that information being shared either. It really is something that we want to maintain as people's confidentiality throughout the entire process, not just the application stage. And if you do have any questions about that, feel free to send them my way, and I'm happy to share more information about the process. Okay, let's look here. Some things to be aware of. We do get a lot of questions about the preferences statement and having that in our job profile. And what we want to do is we're being really intentional about hiring a diverse team with lived experience with human rights. And so there are a number of reasons why we've included the preference statements that we have in this job profile. And part of that is that for an organization like ours to be successful, our staff should reflect the communities that we serve. So a fundamental operating principle and value of the office, as Trish mentioned these a little bit earlier, one of them is nothing about us without us. And so those who have lived experience with human rights have perspectives that we need to inform the commissioner's work. And it is listed as a preference statement. So if that preference statement does apply, please mention it in your application if you're comfortable with it. We also want to be trauma informed, so only share as much information as you're comfortable sharing. And sometimes people ask how we want that information shared. It is up to you. We don't need a separate, statement or document or anything like that. For our purposes, really, just if you want to mention it in the cover letter, that works if you meet those preference statements so that we know for screening. Another question I get sometimes is, can I apply if I don't meet the preference statements? And the answer is yes, absolutely. We welcome applications from everybody, and all applications, whether you meet the preference statements or not, are assessed against that same criteria that I was talking about earlier, those education and experience qualifications listed in the profile. And all of the assessments and everything will be assessing the same things. The other thing I want to talk about that we get questions about is conflict of interest. So you may have noticed a little blurb in the posting that talks about this. So I want to provide a little bit of context for that, a little bit more information about why that's there. So many of those who are drawn to this office's work have gained valuable experience through their social justice work, as well as a diversity of other experiences. That includes private, public, nonprofit sectors. There are a lot of ways that you can get this experience, and a lot of ways that people show their passion for for these causes. And these roots in community and these deeply held beliefs and values, they align with the commissioner's work, and they're essential for this office's ability to build trust with and amplify the voices of those who are marginalized. At the same time, the commissioner's independence lends credibility to the work of the office, and it gives us the widest scope possible to make effective change. And it ensures that the perspectives of a broad range of marginalized people are a meaningful part of the conversation, and a meaningful part of our processes. And so avoiding real, perceived, and potential conflicts is something that's necessary for maintaining the office's reputation for independence. All of this is to say, that's some context about why that information is in the posting. And it's a conversation that we have. So if you're at the end of the process, you're somebody that we're looking at making an offer of employment to, we'll be talking about this at that stage. And it's an ongoing process throughout your employment, an ongoing conversation. It's not meant to be this big, scary thing, but it's something we want to be transparent about, that it's a consideration and something that we will be having those ongoing conversations about. And, you know, like I said, any questions that pop up through anything that we're talking about, please feel free to send them my way through that contact information in the job posting. Okay, I think that's it. Those are all of my speaking notes. We got through it. It's 1:38. We have a few minutes left. Trish, did you have anything to add before we look at some of these questions?
No, that's great. Thanks, Stephanie.
Great. Okay, so this one's for you, Trish. How would you describe your management and leadership style?
I try and take a very collaborative approach to the work, recognizing everyone's expertise, perspective, worldview. Everyone is coming from a different place, social location, and everyone has different things to offer. And we don't know what we don't know. So I really try and take a collaborative approach to the work, and bring everyone in, especially early on project development. I think that's very important to get everything on the table, and then, you know, to come to some decisions collectively about, you know, next steps and what that might be, approaches, research approaches, methodologies, all of that. So a very collaborative approach to the work. I also, in terms of management style, I try and spend a lot of time taking care of the team. And by care, I mean setting up the work environment so that people feel empowered and feel like they can thrive and are set up for success. Recognizing people as whole people, not just workers. So we actually have some things built into our R&P departmental meetings where we spend a lot of time talking about the 4 elements of the self. If you've ever heard of this from some Indigenous traditions, a lot of our work can be cognitive, mind-based, and I think a lot of us feel comfortable there, but really trying to open up and holding people in spirit and body and emotion. So we actually have some intentional practices in the R&P department to foster those sides and bring them into the work and into our team culture. So those are a couple of things I'll just say off the top of my head.
Oh, that's great. And another question for you. What are the opportunities to develop applied research projects within the broader framework? For example, strategic focus areas and ongoing projects that you described earlier.
Was the first part of that, what are
the opportunities to develop applied research projects within the broader framework?
Great. Yeah, I think we had an earlier question on that overlapped a bit with that one too. So there are some projects, we're actually just embarking on a work planning process right now for next year. And there are obviously some projects that are either continuing, you know, some existing activities and projects that continue. into next year, and there are some planned for next year already. But there is always opportunity for the team to bring their ideas. Yeah, and we're also getting a sense of our time and capacity as a team and not trying to take on too much. But I think that is a nice part of being in startup and being part of a fairly small organization, that there is a role, and I definitely within the R&P department foster a role for everyone to bring their ideas for projects and approaches to those projects. I guess back, just one thing I was thinking about with the management style, one thing I'll also add there is that I very much appreciate people and want people to take initiative. And, I give a lot of responsibility where people can take that initiative, and a lot of support to build up if people, have some gaps in skills and expertise. But I'm very keen on people taking a lot of responsibility and initiative and running with things and just, checking in and supporting on the way. I don't think I'm a huge micromanager in that respect. But we also work very closely. Like I say, collaboration is important. So kind of that balance between working independently, taking initiative, and working within a close team.
Okay, and we do have one question here about location. So Victoria has listed one of the locations for this position. Does R&P have members and an office in Victoria? So we have a main office in Vancouver. There is a satellite office in Victoria. I don't know if you have any team members in Victoria right now. I think you do, right, Trish?
On the policy side, we do. Yeah, we have one of our permanent policy analysts is based in Victoria, and they're just on parental leave right now. And actually their replacement for the year is also based in Victoria. On the research side, we're mostly based in Vancouver, though we are bringing someone in who's based in Kelowna.
Okay, I think that's it. Did I miss any questions?
Well, some of the earlier questions that we had beforehand.
Oh, right.
Skim through and see. There was one about when do you anticipate this post will begin? And would it be possible to describe the average day? When it will begin, as soon as possible, basically.
Yesterday.
We have a gap, and I think someone else also asked, was that because of growth at the department or attrition? And it's attrition. We had a research manager in place since last July, and we just lost them to new avenues. So we're looking to fill that role. So as soon as possible. Currently, we have 2 research officers who don't have a manager right now, and 2 more coming on very soon in November. So we'll have a full team of 4, and we really need that manager to support. Otherwise, I'm doing it currently. So ASAP, basically. And then in terms of an average day, there is no average day really here. It's very full at work. It's very fast paced. There's lots of different projects and activities. So you need to be kind of comfortable with that flexibility and responsiveness. And it can feel a little unstable to some, but some people really like that. The big pieces that we're looking for in this role, the research manager versus the research officer, for instance, is the supervision piece. So you're supporting a team of 4. So it's really crucial that you have that experience. Everybody within that team is different. So different approaches for different people, and also bringing the team together to work well together. So that supervision experience is really key. And then project management. You'll be running your own projects and also delegating and supporting your team in other department-led projects. So it's really vital that you've got that experience there that you're bringing to the table as well. And like I said, and Stephanie's also mentioned, this startup role, we need you to be able to build those structures and processes. So you may be spending some time drafting internal policy or thinking about what's needed, and then drafting the internal policy to support the work. So you really need to kind of get your hands dirty, do a bit of everything. Yeah, a strategic, bigger picture thinker for this role is critical.
Mm-hmm. All good points. I do see another question here. Will the interview be experience-based or behavioral-based? The interview will be assessing those elements that we were talking about earlier in the job profile. So if you review the job profile, particularly knowledge, skills, abilities, and competencies, that's where the interview questions will likely be drawn from. I can't, we haven't developed the questions yet, so I can't really say exactly what those are. But that's where we'll draw them from, is that information in the job profile under that job requirements heading.
Okay, and I know we're over time, but just a couple of last questions we had. How is the research agenda set, and to what extent is it internal or conducted with external partners? I'd say a bit of a mix. Like I said, lots of opportunity to contribute to how that's set right now. We do try and work within the strategic priorities as an overarching framework, but we also respond a lot to emerging issues. I did want to just say in response to this question, it's our work it isn't and sometimes cannot be as community-based as some of you might be used to. And it very much depends on the project and which department is leading it. The baseline project will be and is community-based, but some of the other projects may not have that approach built in. And then how much knowledge of the local context is required for this position? It's in the posting, I think, under the knowledge, skills, and abilities section. It is useful if you do bring that knowledge and those relationships that often go along with that, but not required. It's not in that section that Stephanie mentioned earlier around required education and experience. It depends a little bit on the team in terms of complementarity. Right now, we have a bit of a split. We have 2 researchers that have that local knowledge and 2 that don't. They're coming in from Ontario. So like I say, it's useful, but don't be put off if you don't have it. I think we ran through most of them.
I think we did, and we're at 1:49, which I can accept. Going over a few minutes, I think we're okay there. We did good. Okay, well, with that then, what I will say again is thank you to everybody who joined us today. If there are any questions that you have that are still burning for you that we didn't get to, like I said, reach out to us and we'll get back to you as soon as we can on that. But other than that, I think I'll just wish everybody a great day. And yeah, Trish, any last comments?
No, that's it. Thanks very much for joining us. And please do put in your application. We're excited to hear from you.
All right. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks. Bye.